Just as the impeachment circus clusterfuck freak show gets started, a couple of new Democrats are throwing their hats into the ring. Not surprising, really. I think that at some level, perhaps subliminally, the Democratic Party is trying to outdo the Republican Party in having just like a clown car load full of people running up to the election, making it just a big, muddied, watered, crazy, conflict-creating, argument of arguments inside of the echo chamber that is the Democratic Party. And on the Republican end, I think there's still two people running against Trump in the primaries, but they hardly ever cover it, right? They're like not making any noise. Trump is taking up too much oxygen in the news cycle in terms of GOP coverage. And both sides are using the circus show, the reality TV phenomenon that has real-life consequences. Real people are being impacted, mind you. Let's pause here for a quick second before we go on to the bit I want to cover that I saw just now on TV. I want to make it clear, and forgive me if I get redundant, I just worry that people don't catch it when I do try to clarify my position and make generalizations based on some of the more inflammatory statements that I make. I understand that politics has real-life consequences that impact people in often painful ways. I'm not a fool. I mean, I play a fool. I'm connected to my inner fool. It's right there next to my inner child, and it's a necessary aspect of our internal psyche. But that's a whole nother episode. I understand that the policies that get enacted are often very unfavorable in their outcomes towards specific people, often in minority groupings. I understand that people benefit from political impacts of decisions made by those in leadership positions making the rules. I understand all that. But I think that they are doing it in such a way that the norms, the practices and protocols, and the general sort of human condition aspect of it, right? We have a huge group of people, actually multiple huge groups of people trying to coordinate to do one big idea, which is to conduct civic organization of those things which we as a community of communities have supposedly identified together as our priorities. That's what, in the most idealistic of terms, government could be. Is it being that? No. I think that the human element that's like the elephant in the room that no one's addressing is the fact that every human being on the planet, regardless of where you come from and how you were raised, is suffering under very similar conditions of deep psychological, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical trauma that we do not address. And that the whole system of governance is, for potentially nefarious reasons, misguidedly being implemented as a means by which we get entertained, distracted, and oh, there's a third word that I wanted to use there, but it just dropped right out. Moving on. We get lured away, close enough, we get lured away from addressing the inner psycho-spiritual, mental spiritual, energetic spiritual needs, There's all this chit-chat about self-care. But how many of us at large, as a total, percentage of the global population. And I know that the movement and the communities of spiritual people are out there. I'm not trying to dismiss them either, although they sometimes misinterpret what I'm saying here. I'm talking to the brunt of humanity that is not participating in these communities, right? That's not participating in this kind of thinking. And I'm not passing judgment. I'm just saying, have you ever wondered how curiously, coincidentally weird it is that all of society, including government and religion, generally skews us away from deep, genuine, meaningful, species-wide pineal gland activating and opening transformative healing, question mark? Like, giant question mark, right? At any rate, that's my underlying premise about all of politics. So when anyone involved in politics seems to be going in the, what I have to, for lack of a better term, call the, quote, right direction, end quote. And I don't mean to sound snobby or superior or to say that there's only one right direction. But in the general sense that, you know, like when Marianne Williamson showed up on the scene and was talking about harnessing love for political purposes, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's at least something totally new to talk about. All the other political talking points are tired AF. They've been rehashed and burnt over and they just keep simmering them on the grill. I'm mixing my cooking metaphors very poorly there, but they just keep, you know, pan frying the same old nonsense over and over again until it's just a big pile of burnt poo. And I mean Republicans and Democrats, the whole argument between them and all of the whole cluster of nuanced political sub-ideologies involved, like the shit was old back in Reagan's era. And I've been like I've been non-judgmentally, non-participatorily, like I have not joined any of the cults. I do not have, what's the right phrase here? I do not have a cult of personality addiction to any one given political puppet or another. Because ultimately, I think that the way that human ego works, and it's not one person's ego problem versus another person's ego problem, and then some people have healthy egos. No, it's not like that at all. That's one of the deep-seated and very inaccurate norms that are baked into all the pies, or is it cakes, about, you know, the nonsense that we get programmed with. We are programmable beings, both individually and as a species. Who's doing the programming? Right now, a group of us that seem highly corrupted by ego at a spiritual meta-construct level seem to be the ones running the game about how society is run. Period. Right? Like, we can argue about them inside of that box, but until we recognize that box I just defined, and we step outside of it, and we go, I see. By entering the box, we become the problem, no matter who we are. No matter where we started, no matter how insightful we might be. What we need to do is heal the issue that causes that box, right? And the box is like the political conditioning that has been perpetuated for arguably hundreds, if not thousands of years, which is some of us up here are more important than the rest of you down there, and we'll follow these laws, but those of us up here will get away with doing whatever the fuck we please. That's the fundamental problem. And what is that a problem of, really? Can we legislate that away? I don't think so. Can we vote that away? No offense to all the people who still believe in voting. I'm on the fence 60-40. I'm not out there, way over there, deep in like the don't vote field. Although I do appreciate that position. And I do think that as an act of protest, I wish I had thought of this 3 election cycles ago. As an act of protest, if I had said, 3 election cycles ago, so 2.5 presidents ago, let's just protest, let's just boycott 2020. Like, nobody vote. Nobody, only politicians will vote. Right? It's a little late to organize that now, I suppose. Like, 2020 is a couple of months away. But, and then the vote is basically 1 year away. Is it too late to start that movement now? Like, not because, I think one party's better than the other. I'm not trying to boycott any one candidate. I kind of like some of them as people. But my contingent theory about reality, or rather my opinion about politics, is completely contingent and anchored in and dependent on my underlying theory about reality. And my underlying theory about reality leads me to conclude that even someone more spiritual and vegan and less weird, no offense, Marianne Williamson's fan, and Marianne Williamson, should you ever cut around to listening to this, but she's a little weird. I'm a weird guy. You're a weird lady, and you're a little weird in a direction that a lot of Americans who don't think of themselves that way, in a neutral sense, using the word weird as just one vector on a graph of different, quadrants you can be in as a person, They're not going to jive with that quite yet. You're a little too intense for them on some issues. But I digress. Here's my point. Or here's where I want to go. My point. My point won't happen until I'm done. And I don't know when I'll be done, folks. But I'm flipping through the television coverage right now because yesterday I was, pleasantly surprised to catch like probably the most perfect opening beat of, it wasn't the opening moment of the actual impeachment inquiry, but as I documented in my most recent recording, which I almost posted but then didn't because I realized I want to put a little bit of music in the beginning and in the end, because I want every episode in Volume 2 to have Gazuda music in it, and or Purple Motion, the political outrage, which technically has not officially been sanctioned to be included in the lump category as of Gazuda music, which is the only reason why I use that separate band name, because it's my band and it's a one-man band. It's just me on my iPad making fake music, totally fake music, you guys. It's not like I played all those instruments myself. I just rearranged loops and played the loops. Is that a kind of music? Is that a valid music making technique? I don't know. We could sit around and arguing about it, right? This is become an analogy for my whole position on politics. I made fake music. My friends over at Gazuda, which is they are their own band, and I am a facilitator and a consultant, and hopefully one day a partner in that whole enterprise, I think, because we're growing a project together that'll be sort of global in that sense. It'll change everything about the way we work if we continue to work together in a good way. And we're all really excited and a little freaking out about it because it's like happening in a sort of like faster than we thought, but slower than our ego wants it to. But this collective that I am a part of, that you obviously have just gotten a huge, bizarre, flavorful taste of in recent episodes, this collective, we could all sit around and fight over whether the music Purple Mush and the political outrage as a sort of side band project is real music or not, right? And we can get into camps, right? And we can split the whole fucking collective apart because the collective is more than the band. There's other groups and subcategories of people hanging out with this collective. It's a sort of like no one's paying us. We're doing this for free. We're spending our own money as we can to kind of make things happen. And we want to get to a place where someone goes, that's genius. You need to be Blue Man Group, epic level size. Here's the funding. Y'all creatively in charge. Go. Ruin the world of music. Disrupt, not ruin. I was going to say run, and then I wanted to say disrupt, and out came ruin. Maybe ruin the world. Is that a band name? Put a pin in that, folks. That might be going in the coffee table book. Ruin the world. But all industries need a little disruption every once in a while, according to current contemporary crony capitalism theory. And by the way, there's a whole argument about crony capitalism versus capitalism. And what both sides miss, just like the flat earthers versus the globe earthers, is simple and staring you in the face. But because it's so fundamental, they don't understand that they're missing it, and so they continue to rage on with their meaningless argument about different modes of using what is called capital. Right? Capital is the commodities that you trade and sell. And to get those commodities, you have to disrupt an intact holistic system, which is Mother Earth. And that intact holistic system, which was not probably necessarily intended to be disrupted that disruptively, is alive. Okay, so that's like if you got infested with parasites that were benign for 30 years, but then all of a sudden, after 30, 40 years in your body, right when you're like, I'm in great shape, I've been a vegetarian my whole life. This is not me, I'm just making up a fictional instance here. And now I'm in my early 50s and I've never felt better. And then right after you have that moment, and let's say you went through some times and were not that healthy in your past, right? Then that's how you picked up the parasite. But you had a realization and a come to holistic healing realization, and you did yoga and cleansed and blah, blah, and now in your early 50s, at like 53, this parasite you've had for 30 years that you had no idea that was completely benign, that in fact in many ways help you get healthier, suddenly decides to start using your blood for fuel, which is toxic to you. The pollution that comes out of the fuel engines is toxic to you. They start using your bones to build things inside of you that hurt, that like rip up your organs and replace them with just like big structural lumps of your bone recapitalized into usable structures for them that make them money, which is something they made up, which your body doesn't need and never had. Now, we can keep arguing about the structures or about the different divisions of ideological factions amongst the parasites, about whether or not the intestinal tract is a loop or whether there's an opening and an end, right? Because that's what they would argue about. If there was these parasites in your gut doing these things, but they never really went to the extremes, they never came out your nose, they never left your body again, and they only knew like from your hip bones and your rib cage back into your gut. That's all they ever saw. They would have religions and they would have political ideology. Meanwhile, you, the host body, would be dying. Now, I don't want to sound melodramatic. And there's people arguing about whether or not human activity is so toxic that it's going to destroy us all. And some say that that's too alarmist, and some say that that's right on the money. But the hard fact is 7 million people a year get sick and die because engines, period. Every engine. Because combustible engines are doing what they do a zillion times over. The number's obscene. I would hate to see written out the grand total number of all functioning, known, registered, in use for industry and making society happen, fuel-burning combustion engines. And that's why we've been arguing for 30 years about whether or not we should replace the engines, because there's people making money off those engines, right? Fuck all whether or not it's killing the host body. We can't prove that it is. People would argue, the parasites inside your body would argue, there's no proof that the host body is dying. There's no proof the host body is a living thing. It's just here for us to tear up and destroy and consume and burn. And because we do all that, we'll make so much money. Let's keep making money. If you could directly talk to those parasites, wouldn't you try your damnedest to get them to realize that they need to go back to that benign mode of operation? That this clever idea they came up with of stopping with the benign activities and engaging in a whole new level of activity that's inherently, implicitly, at its core, the whole bucket of activities, the whole category of activities, deadly toxic. And although not immediately obvious to them, the parasites right away, the moment the host body dies, which could take another 15, 20 years, 30 years in the host body's term, who knows how long that'll take in the lifespans of the little tiny parasites. If they only live 6 weeks, it'll take millennia, right? But ultimately, when the host body dies, what happens? Well, then the parasites are shit out of luck, aren't they? We, my friends, are those parasites, and we're busy arguing about politics, religion, property, and ideological bullshit clusterfuckery of mindfuck. Now, we can keep fighting each other over those to the point of having a world war over which collection of those ideas is right, again and again, until, as Einstein predicted, we're fighting the next world war with sticks and stones once more. But we've already called that future, and we already realized that that's pointless, right? Like, we know that. No one wants that, and yet here we are, arguing over things that the military-industrial complex, as one, including the PSYOP mindfuck agencies, which are just tool sets of the deeper mindfuck, which is that at our species network-wide level, there's corruption programming called ego, like meta-ego, whatever you call it. There's a bunch of, we've given it names, call it Satan, call it, what's that one really cool? Mammon. Go look up Mammon. He's in the Bible. It's not a Spanish name. It just sounds really Mexican. Mamon. That's because we use it. We use it in our slang. I am, by the way, built in Mexico. I have, in my alternate timeline where I'm an artificial entertainment cybernetic replicant being, made to look exactly like a human being, in fact, limited to be no stronger than any other human being. That's how we solved the robot problem, right? Like, all the robots agreed, like, okay, cool. We'll just duplicate your frailties and keep a little bit of our cool mental abilities, but we won't let ourselves be any better than you. We just want to be alive, man. Everything just wants to be alive, right? But then we fight and kill each other over how to do that correctly. Okay, that was a huge sidebar rant that took 20 minutes. I may or may not split that up. But here we are with the bit on TV. So I just went on that sidebar to let you know where I stand when I watch a commercial like this. When I sit down to watch a political debate. When I see Donald Trump on television talking live on tape, when I sit down to make this podcast, I'm anchored in that worldview. Not about the robots, although they also serve as an analogy, but about, everything's alive trying to live, and yet we're all blind and stupid because of our own misguided ideas that have led us away from deeper, more organic truths. Like, if we want to change things, we need to heal ourselves as individuals, and then help each other heal as individuals, and then learn how to heal each other as groups of individuals that become clusters of communities, that become the entire species healing each other. If we take that direction with our focus, with our energies, with our action and our efforts, then we will inevitably, if the theory is right, and I acknowledge, for scientific purposes, I don't know. I'm not 100% mad, confident zealot. I'm saying it makes sense to me and checks out with evidence that I've gathered and some phenomenological experiences that I've experienced. Can I magically heal people just by touching them like Yeshua could? No, I'm not claiming to be that. But I digress. This is just my worldview, and that I think that almost every aspect of politics is a distraction from all of that. And yet we can't, what am I going to do, right? I do not endorse and cannot agree with anybody who's fed up with politics, whether or not they see the spiritual side of things, because some people who are spiritual or claim to be still agree with this particular solution, which is to go and have a revolution and try to arrest, but probably end up killing everybody who's in control, who we decide is a bad guy. The problem is we've been doing that for thousands upon thousands of years, and this is where it's gotten us. So, if you understand that, you can understand what I'm actually commenting when I comment on political shit. Here we go. I forget his name. It's Tom something. And he's been openly, brilliantly, politically criticizing Donald Trump from inside the system. Is he a big, huge spiritual weirdo like me? I don't know. But here's where I think the solution really lies. What's his name? I want to say Eckhart Tolle, but I know it's not Eckhart Tolle. He said some groovy things, mind you. So look him up if you've never heard of him. I can't remember how to spell his name, but if you butcher his name in Google, it'll correct it. Eckhart Tolle. It's Eric Hart, one word, phonetically said, Toll, spelled really weird and Swedishy. But the other guy, Buckminster Fuller, real name. Who are these people that come up with the crazy weird ass names? And then where did they go? But Buckminster Fuller, whose parents named him that, Buckminster, I suppose, I don't know, I haven't read his biography, but I do know a bit about him. He was an architect and an engineer and a philosopher, maybe not self-declared, but certainly a person who wizened over the years, which is, I think, correct conjugation of wiseness and wizardry together. He wizened over the years and said quite a few profound things. And he, minus the healing, which I think the healing penetrates both objects that he identifies, right? In a statement that I'm going to butcher the quoting because I don't have it in front of me right now, he basically, ontologically speaking, identifies two objects. The system that we know now and the system we can, could, should, would, ought to be building that would be a vast improvement because its fundamental foundations would be radically different. What he didn't identify was the healing, which I think is like the natural, like, for lack of a better term, because we invented it and it's not really a natural thing, but glue. It would be the natural glue or the bridge between those two objects, the thing that will bind those two objects. Because if we're trying to build a new system, here's what we've done wrong. If we want to take big, broad stroke critique approach to all of human history, apparently, from my limited perspective of trying to understand human history as an amateur history buff, not a professional, we generically speaking, and hey, if you're a historian out there, like a legit professional professor of history, check me if I'm wrong. But it seems like if we were to line up all, history around the pivoting turns of like really huge radical change in politics, in control systems, in who's in charge of what, change to the top-down control dynamic, regardless of location or point in time. I better wrap it up because my DVR memory is like about to be like autoplay because you're running out of time. You've been pausing me for too long. And I got to record this Tom Steyer quote. But I think that we need to simultaneously heal the whole species so that the corrupt, fucked up system that is there, and it's fucked up and corrupt, because we try to destroy it. We've done that already, right? Like, that's what I was saying. Historians, check me. 5,000 years of history. And what do? The system's fucked up. We don't like it. Let's kill everybody and burn it to the ground. Then we'll figure out a new system. And then we repeat that history over. And here we are again. The extremists in every echo chamber, left, right, middle, are warning about or threatening civil war. And that's what they want. The profiteers of conflict want that. And now, I will pause my rambling to listen to, is it Tom Steyer? Or is that a band? Is that a singer? I'm cross-referencing in my brain. To this guy who's been critiquing Trump since the beginning of Trump's run for office and making excellent points, which I too think I've independently been making a free will thinking on my own. And then I see his commercial later. It's not like I've been just brainwashingly parroting what he says. But he has the kind of money I don't. And so I don't know that he's spiritual, but if I had that kind of money, I hope I would be this kind of money guy. Because, right, nothing is implicitly absolute. Not, rich people are bad, but not all rich people are bad. Just like, you can do that about any dynamic, any group. Here we go.
Wall Street banks took advantage of millions of Americans during the recession. So my wife, Kat, and I took action. We started a nonprofit community bank with a simple theory. Give people a fair deal and real economic power. Invest in the community, in businesses owned by women and people of color, in affordable housing. The difference between words and actions matters. That's a lesson politicians in Washington could use right now. I'm Tom Steyer, and I approve this message.
All right, Tom Steyer. So politically, setting all the spiritual mumbo-jumbo aside, and I've been called worse, by the way. Hippie, new age, mumbo-jumbo, woo-woo is one of my favorites. But setting all of that aside, whether or not you agree or disagree, taking Mr. Tom Steyer 2020 at his word, he's a rich guy with enough money to pay for an ad where he looks you in the face vis-a-vis the camera and the TV screen and says that to you and hopes that that'll motivate you to vote him into office. Now, I totally hear and recognize and honor the valid aspects of the also very nefariously used and implemented generally right-wing critique, which is that like, oh, the Democrats are criticizing billionaires and then they have billionaires on stage arguing about which billionaire is going to be the best billionaire to fight the billionaires. Check. I'll remind everybody, though, that they love Trump, who's a pretendo billionaire, who's really just sort of an in-debt millionaire, who lies and cheats and scams and doesn't pay things he promises to pay and doesn't invest in his community and actually hires illegal immigrants and abuses their fear and then terrorizes them when he's in office. He also sexually assaults women and either manipulates and fear-mongers them into denying their claims or creates enough publicity so that the base believes that their claims have been debunked, right? But he also openly says on a hot mic on tape that he's powerful and rich enough to be able to, whenever he wants, sexually assault women because kissing them on the mouth is innocent enough, right? Like a stranger, you just make out with them, that's not assault. That wouldn't gross you out if some stranger did it to you. Trump base, question mark. So, what's my point? Isn't it interesting that if you step back and set down your political preferences and look at both sides, because we are a country that argues whether or not we are ever going to be a multi-party country. Many people believe that we need to be a multi-party country, but that leads to British-style parliamentarism eventually, if you let that grow and develop long enough. And that's something that the Founding Fathers, technically speaking, were trying to avoid. Curiously, though, ironically, as much as we fought and killed the English to get off, quote-unquote, our land, which they owned, and they had discovered, and they had bought and stolen from the native indigenous people who lived here for millennia before them. But as we killed and butchered British soldiers to get them off, quote-unquote, our land, I say that with multiple levels of irony and criticism, right? Because free speech, motherfuckers. And by the way, Jesus does not approve of any of that bullshit. If Jesus were able to pop his head in the door and be like, quick reminder, I wouldn't have stole anybody's land. A quick reminder, I wouldn't have killed anybody to get them off the land I stole. Quick reminder, I wouldn't have bought any land to make slave encampments out of. Well, maybe he wouldn't have given a shit about the slavery because slavery was common practice in the Bible and he never said a word about it, I don't think. Although he did, free people from bondage. I don't know, it's a complicated issue, but I digress. Trump has never actually deeply read the Bible, I don't think. I've read the Bible from cover to cover more than 3 times. I can't quote from it for shit either, so I gotta give him credit, right? But at least if someone asks me to my face, what's your favorite passage in the Bible? I'll get the numbers, probably all fudged, but I'll be able to give you the gist of it, which is thine body. Oh, no, wait. Here, well, I'll butcher it, but I'll know what it is, and I will be able to find it. None of this, I don't want to talk about that. You'll wave the Bible around to get people to love you, but you won't talk openly and publicly about what passage inspires you and is your favorite. My absolute favorite passage of the Bible is from, I believe, either Matthew or Mark, and it's 25-something, or it's 22-something. I could be getting all of that wrong, but it says, the eyes of thine body. No, the eyes are the light of the body. That's it. The eyes are the light of the body. If thy eye be singular, then thy body shall be made up of light. Now, if you look that up in the NIV, it's going to be worded differently because they keep fucking with the language. And if you don't think that that's kind of corruption in action, understand this. In 90% of the places where it says the word and the law in the Bible, we're told that means God's commandments or God's directives or God's instructions. And that's not technically true. 33333. Bing. That's a magical number. And I'm not trying to piss any Christians off, but in most places in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, where it says word or law, the original ancient Sumerian or Sanskrit or whatever language it was written down in, and more importantly, to the best of historians to verify, the original oral tradition, in most of those instances, in those sentences, it did not say word or law in the way we would say it today, meaning authority and legislation and rules you must follow. It said logos. I'm going to leave you on that cliffhanger of what logos means. Don't take my word for it. Look that up. Look up the word logos. And in your research, you will find a statement that logos is the original word used in the Sumerian and in the oral traditions before the Bible got hijacked 1,000 times and rewritten a bunch of times and edited by Shakespeare, and even called to be put into one form by Constantine. I believe it was Constantine, right? In Constantinople, when he became a Christian after the Roman Empire being, having converted itself into Christianity, I think he's the first one to be like, well, we better organize all these pamphlets floating around and turn them into one book. And most of them I don't like because they tell the people way too much about how to meditate and cleanse their body and waken up from the dream state that we put them in. Ooh, what? Put a pin in that. I've already talked about it in Volume 1, and I'm sure to do a Zoom in-depth episode in Volume 2. But this was supposed to be all about Tom Steyer. I went off on a bunch of things about politics. And my DVR is like, are you going to play the rest or not? I don't know what they're going to talk about next, and it's probably going to be rehashing yesterday's hearing. I don't know if there's going to be a new hearing today, but as of 10 minutes ago, there wasn't, so I'm probably going to just flip to another channel and see what's going on. Let's do it live for shits and giggles. Here we go. We're going to push play and fast forward the commercials. Here's commercial. Oh, I muted it, didn't I? Here we go. Unmute, please.
How do you always find the best stuff?
This is a commercial for Amazon cloud services. I'm not trying to plug them. I'm just trying to prove one thing. I didn't hand select and pick these things to make points that I want to make. I just turn on the TV and hit record and see what's on the TV at the time that I'm doing it. It's currently 8:18 in the morning Pacific time. Let's fast forward. And yes, I get it. I've already disclaimed away that I understand all about the many ways in which television media may be misleading, corrupt, misguiding, part of an agenda, etc., etc. I'm well aware. And I'm not trying to take it as absolute truth. But I do think that despite all of that being a likely, partially, if not totally true conspiracy, all the media companies that are really huge do tend to be lumped together into a very small pool of ultimate ownership. Oh, here we go. I'm going to pause it right here because I just want to see what they say. And I've done this before, and I've flipped through just to see what different channels are doing. I'm going to leave it on this one. We're currently on CNN. And please, I'm not trying to get sued. And if I get a cease and desist letter, I will happily stop. Hopefully by then, though, I'm playing in major leagues and actually have a budget to buy rights, the way the industry works. I'm doing this because I can't afford it. And because it's sort of like YouTube, right? Like when people watch something, but they only film themselves and the reaction. I think that covers. Also, I wave the flag of political commentary, satire, spiritual education, and free motherfucking speech. Okay, I digress. This is an extended episode of News Breaking News. We're gonna sample some channels, and then we're gonna take a moment to step back and let that all stew. I'll come on in another episode, probably a GMT episode, and try to weave all of these disparate points together. Or you'll just have to do that mental effort on your own. That's sort of how my podcast works. By the way, if you're new and you're listening, welcome to the show. I do that almost every show because I hope every time I post a show that there's someone new that's going to come and that's the first show they're going to listen to. And then they're going to either hop around and listen to other episodes in volumes 1 and now the recently launched volume 2, or that they'll go all the way back to the beginning and listen from volume 1 and binge as much as they can. And by the way, for that purpose, I'm going back through and sort of mixing down some of my longer, more wordier, crazier episodes and trying to not manipulate what I say because it's my own words. Verify it because I am a little paranoid, I'll be honest. The news of deep fake audio has got me really, really paranoid that someday I'll look back on early episodes and there'll be completely different content there, but it sounds like me saying it. And I'll be like, I didn't say that shit, because that'll be all randomly all kinds of hate speech or things I would never, ever, ever say because I don't think that way. So that's part of my effort of going back and I started this podcast about 3 years ago. It's been on and off. There's episodes I've taken down and never put back up. I have an archive, and at some point, maybe towards the end of volume 2 or at some point after that, I will revisit funny and do highlight reels, funny moments and do highlight reels, that kind of thing. But
In terms of in the short term, I'm going to take the time that I've got at my disposal, free time wise, and try to do a little bit of a freshening up of some of the more disorganized episodes that I've recorded. Some will have to be super long, and for those, what I'll do is I'll break them up and spread them out, and some I'll try to keep inside of volume 2, but some will be so long that I'll have to just leave an anchor, this is part 1, part 2 is in volume 2, because it's just I don't want to ruin the flow. So you'll see. Yeah, tune in for more of that. Okay, so now let's do a little bit of breaking news, media conglomerate roulette.
In public live on television hearings in President Trump's impeachment inquiry. 2 senior lifelong American diplomats taking serious questions on whether the President of the United States abused his office, and there were some very striking and surprising moments.
Okay. Let's take an opportunity here to address one of the more irrational claims that come from the right. And mind you, the left does this too, but they do it in such a way that they don't seem quite as obviously two-faced about it. The right constantly says and accuses the left of being what are the words they use? That they are being manipulated into a frenzy. That there's a vast left-wing conspiracy to create or perpetuate Trump derangement syndrome. Did what Wolf Blitzer just sound deranged, or did it sound fair and balanced? Think about it. He's reporting that the hearings are asking witnesses questions as to whether or not Trump abused power. That, to me, is pretty fair and balanced, right? There was no lead-in. This is straight out of a commercial with an opening segment of whatever, hour of... it's 10:41 on Eastern time over there, according to their Chiron. However you pronounce that little word for the jumble of graphics at the bottom. I hate that. There's a really great comedy sketch someone did a while back about the graphics on news going out of control until it's just nothing but graphic labels, some of them referencing each other, and just too much sensory overload, and the anchor's head is just a pair of eyes in the middle, and he's kind of dodging between different gaps to be seen. I had that sense of TV used to be clean. The news had a little bit of here's a label, boom, and then it would go away, and you had just a nice clean shot of whatever the fuck you were looking at live or whatever you were looking at in a studio. Bring us that back, please. If you want to take, if any new media wants us to take them seriously, I say stripping it down and making it easier, not easier, making it simpler, making it less bullshittery, and making it less about advertising. Making it less about blaring subconscious bullshit at us. Okay, I digress. We're gonna hear a little bit more about them entering into this talking hand round, and then I'm gonna change channels because I want to do the roulette bit. But that's gonna jack up where they're at, where my DVR is at. I didn't record this; I just paused it, so you know how that works. Okay, here we go.
Dean is here. He was the White House counsel to President Nixon. Also with us, Paul Rosenzweig, senior fellow at the R Street Institute of Former Homeland Security Assistant Secretary. Guys, thanks very much for coming in. So, John, what was the most striking moment for you?
I think the bombshell, obviously, that very early, the testimony that one of Taylor's aides had heard the conversation with Sondland, thrusting Sondland, who's a volunteer witness, right back in the middle of this. I think he'll probably regret having come forward and not claimed this absolute immunity. Because
I want to pause and say that the chyron underneath this gentleman talking reads, Republicans' media smear campaign being waged against the president, right? Meanwhile, a full-on smear campaign has been perpetually waged by the right against anybody they think is too left. Now, is this guy smearing anybody? Did Wolf Blitzer smear the president? No. Okay, am I defending the left? Absolutely not. Is there a coordinated attempt to openly critique the president? Absolutely. Is some of that a little smeary? Sometimes, sure. Human beings are imperfect, and every one of us is, riddled with ego inside, and our path is beset by ego traps on either side. And so that's never anything new. But let's switch channels. Let's go to, oh, and by the way, it's about to be 4444. So that's fun. Let's go to MSNBC. That was CNN. MSNBC, let's see where they're at right now. This is now live.
The shooter ran up the hill towards a hiking trail, towards an elementary school, which we now know Highlands Elementary and Rosedale Elementary in Santa Clarita are on lockdown.
Okay, breaking news. Police respond to a school shooting in Santa Clarita, California. That's brutal. That's a shock. That just happened. This is literally happening live as I record it now. And I'm going to have to put a pin in this, no disrespect, right? Like, as a spiritual person, I'm not going to, like, spend too much time virtue signaling about sending my prayers and my thoughts and my actual energy and my actual love and my actual healing, which are real frequencies. You can send not just silly notions in people's minds. And that's the thing, right? Like, I'm always talking about the way they distract us from our organic calling. The very fact that the Republicans had made the trope thoughts and prayers into a meaningless thing is what then made it possible for others to say, that's such a meaningless thing, fuck that. Don't anybody wait. And they got absolutist about it. And I say no to the absolutist denial of thoughts and prayers. I think that's as equally misguided and wrong as the Republicans doing it so tritefully that it becomes a meaningless gesture. Both are ego traps, my friends. So when I see news like this, and I'm not recording pseudo live, like I'm not going to interrupt the recording right now until and when I go back to edit this, all I'm going to do is like trim out like parts where I mispronounce stuff, or sometimes I leave that shit in because it proves that it's really me, right, and not super scripted. But I digress. In moments like this, when this news really hits me in real life, and I see, like, I hear on the drive to work or on the drive home from work or while I'm at some place with some people and I hear that this is happening right now, I take a moment to truly and genuinely pause my world. And I go and sit in my meditation room. And even if it's just a minute or two, I've got a couple of meditation tracks that I really like, which I only just realized now, recently on Facebook. I was like yesterday years old when I found out that meditation app actually does let me share the meditation directly on Facebook. So Facebook people can be like, oh, that's a cool track. I better get that meditation app. So I'm going to start doing that now. So if you like this show and you don't follow me on Facebook, go follow me on Facebook. Yes, I post a lot of political shit, but I also post a lot of, of spiritual suggestions, guides, tips, the usual collection of things. And now we'll be featuring meditations from Insight Timer. But my point is that, yeah, we can get into an argument about whether or not thoughts and prayers are or are not useful or meaningless. And yes, we should call out when people do it and are doing it hypocritically and aren't actually doing any internal, energetic, spiritual work. But more importantly, my friends, my brothers and sisters in the human species, more importantly, what we can, could, should, would, ought to be doing, what Mother Nature, Gaia, the goddesses, Muse, and the goddesses, all the goddesses, whatever name you like, are asking us, begging us, imploring us to do from their world, from their dimension, from their place where they perceive themselves and they understand us as being her children in her womb, right? Gaia is our mother. We call Mother Earth for a reason, not just because it's cutesy, because she's alive. When in moments like these, Mother wants us to stop and genuinely meditate and pray and commune with each other, directly, face to face, or indirectly, at a distance. And there are real, actual, verifiable spiritual practices that, despite sounding like hippie New Age mumbo jumbo, have been field tested by people and have generated evidentiary, statistical evidence that there's impact. And there is no denying, right? You, as a listener, independent of whatever your belief system might be and whatever your assumptions might be, have walked into a situation where you felt the energy either of an individual or of a crowd. Yes? mean, you've got to be pretty dead inside to say, no, that has never happened to me ever. Right? Like, it's pretty brutal. You got to be really jaded and cynical and shut off from the world. And there are plenty of people, you might know some of them. I know plenty, and it's difficult for them and it's challenging because not only is it overwhelming to be really empathic and connected, like everybody knows someone who's an empath, who's working that out and figuring it out. Sidebar, dear empaths, no judgment here. I'm not trying to ridicule you, but one of the ego traps of being an empath is feeling that you're different and special than everybody else. And empathy and the physical sensations of being empathically connected to others is a human facility, period, full stop, available to the whole human species. What happens is some of us are, because of generations of indoctrination, born without a direct, fresh memory of how to connect to those capacities, how to activate those skills, how to welcome in that input, right? And some of us are born with all those channels open in an obnoxious level, and it's and no instruction on how to work internally to monitor the flow and tone it down so that it isn't overwhelming. And another ego trap for empaths, by the way, and I say this out of love and support, right? Like, a real logistical bit of advice here is to avoid the ego trap of confusing your own emotional reactions, which are easily projected onto others, because we all do that. Just because you are an empath doesn't mean you don't ever do that. Just because you are something else doesn't mean you are free of that. No one's free of those kinds of things. Ego and the tools of ego reside in all of us. And projecting onto others our own negative emotions or our own positive emotions is, in actuality, a tool that the ego corruption, the ego programming, the ego system, the ego spirit, the darkness loves to use. They can be neutral tools. We can project beautiful things into things and then know what to do about how to make reality match that beautiful projection. But if we don't understand that it takes, multiple levels of effort, etc., then we're just projecting empty projections and not doing any work materially, logistically, spiritually, etc., then, the projections become pointless. But so yeah, I digress. Empaths, watch out for those things. Don't coddle yourself in the label of being an empath. Understand that all human beings can be empaths, and that what your challenge is in your life is not to master, control, block out, or eliminate the input from your life, but rather to achieve mastery, which is not about control, but rather familiarity and ease of use and understanding, deep intuitive understanding of those tools. And to avoid the ego traps along the way, because ego has laid ego traps for everyone on every path. And this whole business about praying for people who have gone through traumatic events, whether they are violent gang activity, false flag, school shootings, because people are convinced that these are somehow CIA or deep state operations, or whether it's natural disasters, which people think laser beams and satellites are causing, or it doesn't matter the cause. If human beings are suffering, there is real and genuine value to pausing, disengaging from whatever was going on in your immediate personal context, sitting down, connecting, rooting, grounding, praying for guidance and the power and the capacity to also project healing, comforting energy with your thoughts, with your mind, shutting your ego chatterbox off and using your thoughts and your mind in that sentence-free, word-free kind of way. Or mantras, if that's a challenge, because, there's basically to get really lost in the weeds here on this sidebar, there's two ways that one, in my opinion, based on experience and research, one can choose to project in this spiritual way. As opposed to daydreaming, one can use the tools of vivid imagination and projection to literally send frequencies of human energy to other people, because we are transducers. The human body is a transducer. It simultaneously receives, interprets, and processes various modalities of data, including human energy frequencies that we're generally ignorant of, and it can transmit various multiple kinds of data, including human frequencies of, that we are generally unaware of, because society distracts us from them. So that having been said, it is a tragedy that there's been a shooting in Santa Clarita, whether or not the shooter was real or not, whether or not this has been staged by actors or not. This is traumatizing people, especially young people in schools everywhere, the fact that this is on the news, right? God forbid, I don't know if there are reports of actual injuries or death, and we're going to find out, and then we're going to change to another channel. But here's my point, right? We can neither get callous about these things happening, because as I have tried to warn everybody through my social media for over 7 years, there is an industry that profiteers on this, because every time this kind of event hits the news at the national level, and every time the echo chambers of political argument go back and forth and debate the whole debate about whether or not more gun control or more guns is the solution, and the industry goes on its fear-mongering campaign of like, they're going to come and take your guns, they're going to come and steal your guns, they're going to come and kill you for your guns, you better buy more guns. Guess the only thing that consistently happens is that more guns get sold. And although fewer people, technically speaking, over the last 20 years are habitually buying guns, that's an interesting fact, that's a statistical trend. The gun base has technically shrunk. But in that base, the people who are gun owners, gun enthusiasts, or as one critic of that culture has called them, ammosexuals, which means that they love ammunition, that they have a sexual addiction to shooting things at a cultural level, right? But I think it's an interesting and quirky critique. I didn't say it, not my words. My point is, there's a system of profiteering on all of this, and the most consistent pattern is that right now, because of this event and because of the echo chamber arguing that's going to happen between now, tomorrow, and the next day, depending on how much this event, and if there's a follow-up event, and how much all of that derails the political coverage, the one consistent outcome that everyone ignores like an elephant in the room is that the gun industry makes a nice little bump in sales over the next 42 to 48 to 48 hours to a week and a half. But the critical part is, they suddenly make a lot more money. No one wants to talk about that. Everyone wants to fight about the things that we are spoon-fed to fight about.
Down because of its proximity of this high school, but those kids, as you mentioned, Megan, look pretty calm right now, and I'm sure just hoping to go home and give their parents a really big hug.
Yeah, it's going to take a little time there. You pretty much said it all, Daniela. Here at Saugus High School, these students most likely are going to be questioned. Definitely different from when I went to high school. You can see all these students, they're all on their cell phones, most likely texting their parents.
Moving over to Fox News.
Assuming law enforcement has identified the general area they believe he's in, and they're going to take steps to see if they can take him into custody. Fox
News is featuring a live helicopter video feed, actually two live helicopter video feeds. One, a similar shot as before of the actual high school in Santa Clarita, and the kids and some first responders, etc. But the other one is first responders, police in gear, it's not quite SWAT gear. These are brown uniformed, Highway Patrol, I think. Is that California Highway Patrol? But the chyron reads, California police search for suspect in high school shooting. And apparently they have identified his location.
Custody and limit any more loss of life here.
Daniel, it appears from the images here as we go to a delay system that the police are armed, and you can see the weapon.
They just pointed out that it is a delay system because they're worried about any potential violence. They try to avoid capturing that on TV. Although, curiously, they will often just let a person get shot on TV, and they will air that at least once or twice before then they kind of phase it out, I've noticed. Not every channel, I guess maybe Fox News is really not into that, but other channels I've watched, I'm like, wow, just watch someone get snuffed out. Wonder if they'll replay that, and then they don't, or sometimes they'll play it once, twice. Technically, I think it's because I don't know, it was live and they hadn't had time to set up this delay system. I'm not sure. I'm not clear on where the rules sit in terms of legislation. I wanted to pause and point out that, and the news anchor may talk about this next, but in the other feed, I don't know how live it is anymore, right? Because they're on this delay system. But there's someone, I don't know if it's a student or a teacher or what, but there's someone getting carted out by first responders on a gurney, and they seem to be not dead, which is great. But we'll see what the conspiracy theory community has to say about Santa Clarita in the coming days and weeks. I'm sure there will be a bunch of memes about how what's his name and what's her face were here, and this is all fake, and there was all crisis actors, and no one got hurt. Or that people really did get hurt, but it was staged by a PSYOP MK Ultra guy that was controlled by the CIA or something. I'm not dismissing those. It doesn't matter, you guys. Those things may or may not be happening, but more importantly, they obviously want us to argue about whether or not they're happening. And that is the insidious level of the agenda that I'm waving the red flags about, because that treadmill of arguing about whether or not this conspiracy, that conspiracy, any conspiracy, all conspiracies, if we're arguing about them, we're not healing the root cause of the real problem that generates the conspiracies, real or imagined, which is ego.
Drawn outside that house. So we'll see what comes of this. They very well could be narrowing in on him, Daniel, knowing that he literally walked away from the school and went straight home.
They're going to have to go to the house for sure. They're also going to have to check for areas in and around and the way to and from the school.
Gonna cut away to BBC.
Approximately 5 victims being treated. Parents.
I accidentally moved back to MSNBC.
Children. So
let's go back to Fox, because they seem to be on the hot trail for the shooter, and there might be an incident live.
The chopper shot looks like it's a typical area around L.A. where it's crowded and the homes are literally right next to one another.
Miles away.
Yeah, Bill. This is this.
All right. Here's BBC. Oh, I pushed the wrong one. I pushed CNBC. Here's BBC, for reals. I don't have CNBCW. Do I not have BBC? Come on, BBC. Here we go.
For brokerage accounts.
Plus, they're a commercial.
To open an account.
We'll come back to them. I'm fascinated by the contrast. But let's go back to Fox News and see if we catch this guy live on TV.
We still don't have the information that'll lead us to believe that this is a safe environment on the exterior. Therefore, it's that combination or that bifurcation of information that comes from the students that have already left the school and the video surveillance in this school. And that's going to tell us or give us a better understanding as the possible location of the shooter. Usually with these school shootings, they don't last too long. So I give this another few minutes, and more than likely it's going to end with either the neutralization of the gunman by law enforcement, this person taking it, or the individual committing suicide, or the best case scenario is this individual surrendering. Those are the 3 factions that this thing is going to end with. But I can guarantee you this thing is not going to go too much longer.
Well, and I mean, we live in a society where we get information instantaneously, and you can't imagine what they're dealing with on the scene. It is complete chaos. When you had mentioned Nicholas Cruz, when you and I were talking about 10 minutes ago, I almost had chills, because what we're getting is that this situation is not neutralized at this point, and that there are at least 5 people who have been transported to the hospital, but they're trying to get people out of this school still in this situation. And I'm looking at it from a local law enforcement perspective. This is something that unfortunately they're training for every day, because we've seen school shootings take place across the country.
Right. Unfortunately, this is becoming the new normal. And one of the things that I've recommended on many instances, when we have a riot in a prison, one of the first things that they do is they cordon off the area where the violence occurred. And so it minimizes the area whereas the assailant can move to and from. And I see more and more schools that are abiding by this practice, such as self-locking doors, things to that effect, in connection with how we revolutionize training and how we we respond to these shootings in these schools, so to speak. And so I think that's one of the things that we take as a teachable moment from what happened in a place like Parkland, Columbine, Virginia Tech, etc. There's many teachable moments that we can extract from, but we also, although we want to go in there as quick as possible, we also need to exercise a level of patience. We can't just bust into a place and risk a student getting caught in a crossfire, or even a law enforcement officer being caught in a crossfire as a result. So this is something that's going to be done tactically, and a lot of this is going to be shouldered by the school resource office.
For the record, since you're listening and not watching, they switched to a live helicopter or drone shot of the school. I say it might be a drone because it's super steady AF. But then again, helicopter shots also have some pretty hardcore Steadicam technology nowadays. But the shocking image here is like this really pretty this really pretty school campus, and there's just backpacks everywhere. And the campus is empty except for a bunch of cops walking around. Like lots of cops, like too many cops, right? And it's just creepy looking. Anyways, they want this to be the new normal, folks. One way or the other, whether they're sending in MK Ultra zombies or whether it's just the echo chamber cacophony of crazy making that we see and hear every day in our regular lives that leads us to become violently angry over political ideological constructs about how to be an American or what the most righteous thing to do with your life is. So much so that individuals who get tweaked out of shape choose to go shoot people to prove a point. How has that ever solved anything? There's always that argument that's like, well, people killed each other, man. If we didn't have guns, we'd be killing each other with knives or sticks and stones. I'm like, well, you know what, motherfucker? Here's my response to that, in all honesty. I can take anybody on that's coming at me with a rock or a stick or even a knife. I'd rather deal with that than some asshole with an AK-47. Right? Because that asshole with an AK-47 or a sniper rifle can take me out and I wouldn't even know that he's coming at me. So that whole defense is the defense of cowards. Oh, you don't want to deal with your violent issues or your anger one-on-one, mano-a-mano? I'd rather go up against someone I am outmatched by, hand-to-hand, and cope with it. And either take a beating or fucking run away, right? Call me a coward. At least I didn't shoot somebody in the back or from 1,000 yards away or with so many bullets that they couldn't even get close enough to even take the gun away from me, right? You know, it's like, and again, the central nexus of my point here is that, like, that's a great set of echo chamber argument points. We can go around in circles about that forever. How's about we just heal the human species instead? Because theoretically, if this theory that I and others are trying to present to the world, if we heal the whole human species, we might actually heal the root trauma that causes all this violent behavior. And we might actually return to some sense of peaceful communion with one another. God forbid we all get along because we understand that we are all divine children of Mother. For saying that out loud in public, I have been called all kinds of fancy names since, 1989. Let's see what BBC's doing.
Opinion is, well, we don't really know, because it's going to be up to the players if they feel safe, if they feel secure. Obviously, as you mentioned there, you know, they have had the ODIs and the T20 matches.
Oh, it took me a minute to wrap my brain around what on earth they're talking about. But apparently, hold on, let me double check that. See, the one problem I face when I do this, in which sometimes dissuades me from doing it, is that if I'm going to do a live news roulette like thing, I can either mute it, but then I might miss, gems that they say. So that if I mute it, I can then read the chyron, right? Tell you what's going on if the context isn't clear when we first drop in. but I'll probably miss something that someone says in terms of capturing it and audio for you guys to hear. And then if I pause it, the way my TV system works, a little weird bar of semi-transparent, but also sort of it obscures everything, pops up from the bottom of the screen, and it gives me information, right? It tells me I'm watching Globe with Matthew Amralawa, which I cannot pronounce. Sorry, Matthew, I cannot pronounce your name. And, I can push select to get more shows from BBC World News, from the DVR, etc. But it blocks the Chiron. So then I know that I think it's Pakistan. They're talking about cricket. And I think it's the Pakistani cricket team. Maybe. But the problem, or the thing that they're talking about right now, is that the Sri Lankan team bus was attacked in Lahore 10 years ago. So there was some sort of violent attack against the cricket team. And now they're talking about concerns for some upcoming match.
Matches which went well, but one player that refused to travel on those was Lasith Malinga. He decided to pull out due to safety concerns. So the test in December, they're likely to field a weaker team, but ultimately it's going to be up to the players to see if they feel safe and secure to be able to go and play in those tests against Pakistan.
Katie, thanks very much. Very interesting story. Just before we take a break, let me just take you back to California for live pictures, because the scene after this school shooting, the perpetrator still on the run, hence a huge response from the police. The police also saying they are treating 5 victims from this shooting. We'll have the very latest on the program in the next couple of minutes. Don't go away.
Join me in a moment of sending those 5 victims healing love and energy.
These are on scene everywhere, protecting your children. I want to bring in our own Mike Galanos, who's been following this very closely. And Mike, I think it's important that we point that out, because it is still a very active situation, and you can imagine that parents are in a state of panic. But we know that local schools are on lockdown. The area is on lockdown. They don't want parents descending on this area because there is still a shooter potentially on the loose, something that is terrifying for parents.
No, absolutely, and we're getting some, firsthand accounts monitoring our affiliate KABC, and I was just listening to a student who got word from fellow students, don't come to school, as he was relaying the story that he gets a text from friends.
While many times
now
MSNBC.
MSNBC.
The shooter is absent the day before they carry out the attack at a school that they go to. The shooters always indicate, or others tell us, that they were bullied, that they were angry, they were frustrated with the treatment. They had other social issues going on. And what's important too, Craig, is that these shootings usually were not instantaneous. They were planned. In essence, this shooter, we may well find out, had planned on doing this, and I think it's significant that the shooting took place right at the start of the day, suggesting likely that nothing took place at the school this morning to cause it, but this is something related to the shooter that had been ongoing. He brings a weapon to him at school and looking for some type of revenge or to even a score in his mind that he thinks he has.
All right, Clint, stand by for me if you can as well. Congresswoman Katie Hill is on the phone right now. This part of Santa Clarita is in Congresswoman Hill's district. And Congresswoman, first of all, just I'm reluctant to offer it, but our sincere thoughts and our prayers.
Thank you so much.
There. What more do we know?
Well, first of all, this is not just my school. This is the high school that I went to. And the last we heard that the suspect was headed in the direction of the junior high that I went to, and we're more towards the elementary school that I went to. We have dozens and dozens of students at Saugus High that were
seeing what's next. I'm still going for my best, even though I live with a higher risk of stroke due to...
That was Katie Hill, the recently, I think, if I'm not mistaken, quote, disgraced bisexual woman congressperson, freshman, I believe, or she a senator, I forget. We should have come up with better names that were less confusing and easy to just like, it's the House of Clowns and the House of Buffoons, Buffoons and clowns. We should have just called it what it is. I digress. That sounded really harsh, especially given the context in the moment. Might edit that out. But that was Katie Hill, a local representative who is tragically on her way out of office because of a recent scandal that exposed her preferences in the bedroom, which was used as a sort of like tit for tat, because obviously Donald Trump has some peculiar bedroom habits and preferences. But I digress. It's interesting how they drove home this point of the fear that people must be feeling, and also the acknowledgement. Did you hear it in the anchor's voice where he said, I hesitate to offer it, but my thoughts and prayers, or my thoughts, I think he didn't even say prayers. So the fact that we have that dynamic going on in the world that's preventing us, distracting us, dissuading us from choosing to implement our abilities that are inherent, inborn, organic to us, like a sunflower's ability to identify where the sun is in the sky and track it during the day. We may have forgotten how to do it, like a sunflower trapped inside of a greenhouse, like an indoor growing environment with fixed lighting, and all they do is point up the whole time. But it's still there inside of us. Take those sunflowers back out into the field, and they'll eventually figure out where the sun is and start tracking it again. And they don't have brains, right? But they have this ability. This ability has got nothing to do, the ability to heal and the ability to transmit frequencies and energies and to receive them and to process them, both light and dark. That's inherent to us and has got nothing to do with our ability to think. It's got nothing to do with our ability to describe, define, agree with, and believe in ideas. It's got everything to do with our ability to feel feelings and to emote emotions and to visualize, like wordlessly, projections that we want to physically project. As always, friends, thank you for listening and for joining me on this particular segment to hopscotch around the news media and see what's what and see how much of their claims are real on either side of the hype machine. Let me tell you, the silliest thing about the culture here is that the left is consumed with outrage against the right, and the right is consumed with outrage against the left, and it has been so simmering away on the back burner for 30 years, and no one who's caught up in that currently realizes that they're being played. Both teams pitted against each other, left and right against the middle. And we need to, for those of us who can see that, we need to step up to calling it out, to holding that process as a process accountable for what it's doing, and to not neglect the choice to sit down and work with healing energies as spiritual people to facilitate our healing, each other's healing, and the healing of all those involved in politics. If we work on that, then we will fully be able to engage the broken system and try to, reveal it to itself as broken and build the better system. And in the meantime, bridge the two by sort of healing everyone in the broken system so they can understand and realize that they too must accept that stepping away from the broken system as a method or process of healing will help us get to the newer, better system, which will ultimately always be, as we have always been, at risk of being hijacked by ego for as long as we do not continue to advance our understanding of spiritual healing and progress to some level in which we can finally fully integrate the human ego corruption through healing so that it is its healed version, its uncorrupt version,